So things we're going to use in this tutorial. I'll start with the easy stuff first. We are going to need an 8.5 millimeter drill bit to drill in the front turn signal holes so that you can mount the turn signals to those holes. We're going to need, this is called a third arm. This is going to be used while we're soldering. You can get those pretty cheap on Amazon. We're going to need flux. This is something we'll use while we're soldering as well to kind of help facilitate the metals joining. We're going to need multiple coils of wire. I got these in different colors. They kind of match up with some of the other lighting that I have, so these were great. You're going to need a lighter. This is heat shrink. This is to effectively cover areas where we're soldering, so that they're protective. You just use this little rubber stuff, heat it up, and it shrinks around that. Definitely going to need wire strippers. You're going to need something to remove pins out of harnesses. So I just have a very tiny flathead. I'm going to do this all-in-one tail light. This is on Amazon. And it's super cheap, like 13 bucks. These are way more expensive. This is going to be, I have two of these for my front blinkers. So this does all of my lights in the back. It does DRLs, brake light, left and right turn signal. These are two separate, or I have two of these. These are for my front turn signals. These are way more expensive. They're like 40 bucks a piece, but they're super cool and you can barely see them, but they're super bright. And then lastly, we're gonna need a bunch of different types of clips. These are for joining wires together or hooking up to the relay, which actually I forgot to mention here. We're gonna need 2 relays, and these are super cheap as well, 5 bucks on Amazon. I'll include them all in the links. Rather than heading back to this, we'll use what are called alligator clips in here, these guys, to actually hook on to the terminals on the relay. I'm sure there's stuff I'm forgetting, but generally this is it for now. All right, so first step is to take apart the bike. I'm not going to go into that. You can find a million tutorials on how to take it off. Basically, you're going to want the seat off, and you're going to want, I would probably do both panels off just for ease of use. I only have one off here. I'll probably do my right side in a minute when I go in to start really hooking things up. Yep, and then you're going to want to locate this harness. So I did not have the blinkers installed before this, so this was kind of empty. This might look different from you all, but generally you want to look for these 2 green wires, this red, and these pink wires as well. Now those are for the front blinkers, and they'll also support the black blinker or the back blinkers as well. So I'll talk more about that later, but just look for this harness. So identify this. Nothing should really be plugged into it unless you had the stock Onyx blinkers to begin with. And then we're going to want to find this harness right here. So it's a black, a blue, and a yellow. And so I've already depinned them. Do not let them touch. I blew my DC right here, literally the first thing I did when I tried to do this mod. So do not let these wires touch. You can see I have them rigged up really precariously. Don't do it like me. And so last thing you're going to want to do, kind of that pre-work, is going to be disconnect your tail light and all the little fun things on it as well. We'll probably end up removing all of the wiring here. Yep, stay tuned. All right, so we're gonna start with the hard stuff first. And that is actually replacing the wires, or as much of the wire as we can on this guy. As you can see, these wires that come with it are super tiny. They're like 10 gauge, 8 gauge, I don't know, super duper thin. And so in order to avoid them kind of like overheating, and what I've heard from other people is them like melting actually, we're just gonna increase the gauge. So we're lengthening the wires for 2 reasons: to just ensure they work properly over the life of the install, and also we need extra length coming off of this actual light. so that we can get it all the way through the bike basically. And so we're gonna solder the white wire off of this guy onto some of the white wire that we purchased in our kit. So I cut off about, I don't know, probably like 8 feet right here, maybe less, I'm not sure. And I just, said the more the better. Really, you want to be more safe than sorry on this type of thing. So cut off a ton and then go ahead and strip the tip of it. And then I'm going to show you what to do next when it comes to soldering these together. All right, so we have both tips stripped. And what you're going to want to do is kind of flare out both sides of these wires a bit so that they can better join. You want these kind of to be like pushed out a bit like that, maybe not so much like that, but in a more of like a fan kind of style. And then you're going to want to actually insert these wires into each other just like that, and then twist them together. And you really want them to be able to kind of hold on their own when you maybe give them like a super gentle yank. And then once you get these together, you go in with a pair of tweezers or maybe a paintbrush and take this flux. So this is called flux, and this is to help facilitate joining the two materials together. You're gonna paint that flux onto these wires here and be generous with it. The more the better really, and really try and keep it on the metal only. And then we'll move on to the next step, which is actually joining the wires together. So you can see here I've got my flux on the kind of cold joint that I've made with the two wires I'm going to join. And then now it's time to actually solder them together. So we're going to take our soldering gun here and let's get you in focus. There's a lot of stuff on my bench, as you can see. And so you just want to clean the tip off basically, get it nice and clean looking. And that's about as clean as it's gonna get, which is fine. So you're just hitting it on this wet sponge basically right here. And then you're gonna wanna tap it on your solder right there. So my solder is right there. I'll just tap it. You kind of preload it with solder. And then you come over here and you actually heat from the bottom with the soldering gun and hold your solder in your hand, and you kind of touch the solder to the wire. And at some point, after holding it there for maybe 5-10 seconds, the solder will start to flow, and then your connection will have been joined. So you want to get a decent amount of solder on there, not a ton, but enough that you feel comfortable and think the connection is strong. So I'm going to go ahead and solder this up and show you what it looks like. Okay, the connection has been made between these two wires. As you can see, it's not the prettiest thing ever. I'm soldering, 18 gauge to like, so 18 gauge is on the left here. I'm soldering 18 gauge to, I don't know, probably 10 gauge. It's a very thin wire. So I ended up using a decent amount of solder. You end up kind of melting this wire a little bit because it can't take a whole lot of heat, but that's okay. What you're gonna wanna do after this is go in and test the connection, and I'll show you how to do that now. So to test all of our lights when we're soldering them, we're gonna wanna find a harness on the bike that has power to it. And we're gonna use the Tailight harness in order to do so. And so remember we removed the taillight and kind of all the good stuff there. And so these are fine to come off. And then if you follow that wire down, that wire, so this was originally for the blinker, so this shouldn't have anything plugged into it, but this does. So it had that black, the red, and the purple there plugged in to this harness. In some combination, I already took this apart and I don't remember what it looked like, but it was black, blue, or I guess that's purple kinda, and yellow. And so here we have the ground wire, which is black. We have the tail light, which is probably yellow, and then, that would be the DRL tail light, which is probably yellow. And then that purple light would be like your brake light, basically. So the yellow one's running all the time. The purple only comes on when you squeeze your brakes. And so this is what we're gonna use to test our new tail light wires, basically. All right, so let's take the black wire from the tail light and the white wire that we just soldered and touch them to something on the bike to see if our solder join worked. So go ahead and turn on the bike. Don't worry, you're not gonna shock yourself. Be careful though, don't let any of these wires touch each other, so that yellow touching the black or something like that. And so what we're gonna do is connect our ground wire, our black wire, to the black one coming off of the bike to give the light power, and it's not gonna turn on yet. And then we're gonna connect this white wire to the yellow wire. And this yellow wire is coming off the bike as well. And it's actually connected into the DC right there. And so let's go ahead and touch them, and we're gonna see what this turns on our new tail light. So if we get close enough, let's see. Boom. And so I'm not sure, that to me looks like it's potentially a brake light. It could be the DRL, like just standard running tail light, but it doesn't matter. We'll figure that out as it comes along. The main point of this was that our solder join worked correctly, and we figured out how to test wires on the bike. And so remember, we still have this joint open, and now we're going to need to take some of this heat shrink here and actually cover this join with the heat shrink. So super easy, you just find the correct gauge heat shrink for your wire, and I know that they are these guys, so quite small. You want to find the smallest one possible, and then just slip it on this end right to here, and then just hit it with basically brush it with a lighter, and you'll see it kind of shrink over the weld, and now it's protected and pretty much good to go. All right, and now it's up to you to actually complete that same process for all of the wires on the bike. So I've done most of them at this point. I think I have one left to go, but you're going to need to do about 6 solder joints. So not the worst thing. So once you have created this monster, you have all of your new wiring soldered onto it. I'm gonna go ahead and just tape up this thinner part of the wire here. Just, I don't know, just to make it feel a little bit stronger. So I'll just go in with like black electrical tape and tape up the smaller part. And then we're gonna repurpose some of the parts off of the bike that already exist. So this was that harness that was coming from the tail light, and we're gonna go ahead and pull it out. So you can pull it this way basically. So I'm pulling it through the bike here, through this hole, and then here is what was sticking out the tail, and now I'm pulling it out. And so we're actually going to reuse this harness here, and then I'm going to try and take this as well, just and put it on my wiring setup, just for, you know, added kind of protection. So go ahead and pull this all the way out, basically. So the next step for us is to actually clip these wires. So we're actually just gonna clip it as closely as we can to this metal part here. And then we're gonna add these bullet connectors onto the either sides of our wire. So we'll add this bullet connector to the one that receives, so I guess is the female. We'll add this bullet connector to the wire coming off of the bike, and then the other side of the bullet connector to the wire coming off of our light. And so you're gonna wanna do the red wire to the blue wire. The red wire is our red light high beam, so that's when we brake, meaning the light is gonna get brighter. So we're gonna use this as the red light high beam, so red to blue, and then yellow to the white. So that's just gonna be our DRL, or our running rear light, basically, on the light here.